Xuan is dropped in Honkai Star Rail and has been well received by the community. She's also our first preservation character to be added since launch. So today we'll be going over her build, her different Lcones, different team pairings you might want to try for her, the whole kit and caboodle. So let's go ahead and talk about how you're going to want to build Xuan. First up, let's talk about her kit. And now I'm not going to go over the whole thing here just because you can read for yourself if you have her. But in a nutshell, Xuan takes damage for your team and is also able to heal herself after getting below the 50% mark on her. As well as heal your characters a little bit via her additional bonus abilities here on the traces. So whenever she uses her ultimate, she'll heal your party a little bit based off of her max HP, which is pretty nice, which is why she's capable of solo sustaining your team, meaning that you don't necessarily have to have a healer on your team anymore if Xuan can cover it, because she's not only taking damage for your team, she's also able to heal them a little bit, which is quite nice. She also has a ton of crit rate traces here on her little trace thing, so that's pretty nice, allowing you to actually crit with her fairly consistently without investing into it heavily. And then she also does have the ability to regenerate some energy on her own via her other bonus ability here, and her whole kit revolves around utilizing her skill, which is what is going to allow you to take damage for your allies as long as it's up. It lasts 3 turns. It also gives everybody a max HP buff and a crit rate buff, bumping the consistency overall of your team. And that's kind of the core idea behind Xuan, is that she takes damage for the team, is able to heal them a little bit, and then heal herself a little bit, as long as you're consistently getting her ultimate, which is what refreshes her ability to be able to heal herself. So that's a huge component to her. She also scales entirely off of HP, basically. Even her normal attacks here scale off of HP, so that's important to note as well. So the big takeaways here from her abilities is that HP is incredibly important, as well as getting your ultimate as fast as you can is incredibly important in order to ensure that you're sustaining the team as much as you possibly can. Next up, let's go ahead and go over some Lcones. What is going to be the best Lcones for your Xuan? This is a fairly simple section, so I wanted to go over it first before delving into the more complicated section of her relics. And of course, the best Lcone for her is going to be her signature Lcone. She already shut her eyes. This thing is ridiculous. Its HP is insane. It gives you 1200 as to oppose the next best being 1000 on the free-to-play 5-star Lcone, I believe. I don't think any of the others come close on the HP. But not only that, the actual ability of the Lcone here increases her max HP by 24% at the first superimposition. It increases her energy regeneration rate, which we just discussed how important it is to have energy regeneration on her, so you're getting that ultimate. And not only that, when her HP is reduced, she increases the damage of everybody by 9% at the first superimposition here as well for 2 turns. And then if that wasn't enough, then when a new enemy wave comes in, meaning that when you clear an entire wave of enemies and like new ones fill in, she heals everybody to 80% of the respective lost HP, which is pretty nice. It allows you to just kind of refresh when a whole new group of enemies comes in. Now, this doesn't count whenever like an enemy summons another enemy or anything like that, or like a new turn starts, or like a new cycle starts or anything. That's not what it's talking about. It's just talking about whenever you clear an entire set of enemies and a new one fills in. But regardless, that's still quite nice, and everything else is already absolutely ridiculous. And if you had all the superimpositions, then this thing just gets ludicrous, but most of us aren't going to be doing that. This is already the best Lcone for her by far. But what about everybody else who doesn't have her signature Lcone? That's entirely understandable. And what I was doing for a while until I actually got lucky enough to get her Lcone, my next best bet for you is going to be the free-to-play 5-star Lcone, in my opinion. This one is quite nice, especially since you can get the superimpositions for free. This is an entire free-to-play Lcone from the Herta store. Its HP isn't too bad here, but its effect is also quite nice. You get effect resistance, which isn't the greatest thing in the world, but it is still quite nice on her because it's going to make sure that she doesn't get debuffed in some way that prevents her from taking damage for the team. And if you don't have a healer or something, that's going to be very detrimental to what, you're trying to do in the survivability department. So having that effect resistance does come in clutch, but not only that, she gets a shield that's based off of her max HP, which is pretty nice, especially since she's entirely HP scaling. scaling, so it's going to be a fairly hefty shield, especially when you have the later refinements here. And then not only that, it reduces the damage she receives by a percentage while she has that shield, which is incredible. And the damage reduction is incredible because that's going to stack with something we didn't really go over too much on her talent here, where the whole team just takes less damage overall. So she's going to be taking substantially less damage, which is very, very good. Which is why ultimately this is my next best Lycone in my opinion, just because it does help her in a lot of different ways, and the stats are just very good as well. But even then, that's still not your only option. Maybe you're using that Lycone for another character or something. You do still have some other options. I think these are kind of the best, but let's go over some of the 4 stars. So next up, I'd personally recommend Day 1 of My New Life. This one is very good as well. It increases her defense by 16%, which isn't all that important on Xuan, but defense does still matter as it is going to decrease the overall damage that she takes, improving her survivability. But not only that, you also get the all-type resistance on all allies by 8%. So this is pretty insane. This is very, very good, especially if you have higher refinements. That's going to be very good. Increasing survivability overall, not to mention that the HP stat on this isn't that much lower than the 5-star free-to-play one, so this is still quite good. But other than that, I don't think too many of the other 4-star Lycones are all that great. Landau's choice is fine, does reduce some of that damage taken. I don't think this is too bad or anything. It's just fine though, in my opinion. You do have a weird 3-star option though. Defense here is pretty nice because its HP isn't actually that much lower. Its defense is substantially lower though, so that is going to hurt you a bit. Same with the attack here. But the passive here is kind of nice because when the ultimate, when the wearer unleashes their ultimate, they restore HP by 30% of their max HP, which is fairly nice for some consistency. So if you're just really struggling for Lycones, this 3-star option really isn't too bad, and I think you could easily use that. But in my opinion, yeah, her signature Lycone first, second Texture and Memories, and then third probably Day 1 of My New Life, and then you have a couple other decent options at best. Moving on to Relics, this is where things get interesting because you actually have quite a few options to go for your Xuan here, depending how you're going to want to build her. Now, I've got the 4-piece Longevous Disciple on her to increase my max HP and increase some of the crit rate there, which is quite nice, and I have the 2-piece Broken Heal, but these are not your only options. Let's talk about some set options. Now, if you want your Xuan to be a bit of a hybrid build between, you know, sustaining and keeping your team alive, as well as being capable of dealing a bit of damage herself, then I think the 4-piece Longevous Disciple is quite nice. The crit rate bump is pretty nice, allows her to crit fairly consistently, and then the max HP bump, everything scales off of max HP, which is nice. But I think the more effective route, if you really want to make sure she's just an absolutely cracked character for your sustaining purposes, then I think a 2-piece of the Longevous Disciple, as well as a 2-piece of the Messenger Traversing Hackerspace is quite nice. That speed percent increase is very, very good for Xuan, allowing her to ensure that she has more turns to generate energy, to get her ultimate, to ensure that she still has her buff up so that she can actually heal herself while she's taking damage for your allies is very, very good. Speed is very, very good on Xuan. You do a 2-piece of the HP set here, and also pair that with something like the 2-piece of the Guard of Withering Snow here, where it reduces the damage that you take by 8%. This is going to improve your survivability as well. So if you find yourself getting, you know, knocked around by a couple of the enemies, then you might want to slap on a 2-piece of these, as that'll definitely improve some of your survivability. And if you were farming the Quantum Domain a bunch and you just happen to have a bunch of good pieces from this, then this might just be an easier option for you. I'd honestly focus in on your substats more so than caring about the set effect for Xuan, as the substats are really what is going to bring her up. But as for the old ball and chain, you do have a couple options here as well. The Broken Keel set I think is pretty nice. As we mentioned earlier, effect resistance is fairly solid on Xuan, just to make sure that she's not getting debuffed in some way that is going to hurt your survivability. Plus, you also get the crit damage increase here, which for me personally, a lot of my allies are lacking in the crit damage department, so this helps me out a lot in particularly, and it might be, you might be in the same shoes, so I recommend this one personally. personally, especially, you know, depending how your account is. But this next one is equally as good and is a very, very good ball and chain combo for her as well. That being the Fleet of the Ageless, increases your max HP by 12%, and whenever your speed is over 120, increases all allies attack by 8%. And that affects stacks, so if you have somebody else with Fleet of the Ageless as well, like your healer or something, then you're just getting 16% attack. It's quite nice, really, and this is just as good as Broken Keel in my opinion, if not better. And if you find your Xuan lacking a little bit in the HP department, then absolutely slap this on. But if you have a solid amount of HP, then I'd probably recommend Broken Keel. All right, as for the main stats that you're going to want to look for on Xuan, you do have a couple options, but I think that ultimately this is going to be the best route that you're going to want to go for, and that is going to be HP percentage on the chest, speed boots, HP percent ball, and energy regeneration chain. And the reason that I think this is the best is because, well, you need speed to ensure that you're getting as much energy as you can to make sure you're getting your ultimate, to make sure that Xuan stays alive. And then same with the energy regeneration rope, same philosophy there. And then you're just looking for HP as much as humanly possible beyond that. Now, you could easily swap out the speed boots for something like HP percent boots or something, but I would really recommend that you have just absolutely cracked substats in the speed department if you're going to do that. I think you can get away with that if you've got, you know, HP boots with just really good speed or something, then you could get away with something like that. I think that is fine. And there is an argument that if you have your signature light cone, then you don't necessarily need the energy regeneration rope here, as that is going to help you out, as the light cone does help you out a bit, but I like having both. I basically always have her ultimate in the pocket, which is very nice, making sure that buff is always up. Having both does help a ton, but especially if you don't have her signature light cone, then I would highly recommend the energy regeneration rate. And if you already have Xuan, and maybe your Xuan doesn't feel all that consistent or something, and that's why you're here, if you don't have an energy regen rope, that might be the case. I was running her on mostly HP set before, and her consistency of being able to solo sustain the team just really wasn't there for me personally. So having the energy regeneration rate rope here helped a ton in that department. Now, this doesn't allow you to have as much HP as you might otherwise if you were just running like a bunch of HP percentage or something, but I do think this is the route because of the consistency it yields you for your ultimate is ultimately more important for the survivability of your team. Now, there also has been a bunch of discussion about having a defense percent main stat somewhere along the line here, and honestly, I just really don't think that is worth it. It does help reduce some of the damage you're taking, but Xuan wants so much HP already, and you want the consistency there for her speed and her energy regen rope, so I just don't see fitting in the defense percent main stat anywhere being all that great in my opinion. It does work and it is okay, but I just don't think it's as good as a setup like this, and you're far better off looking for defense percent in something like your substats. Speaking of, what substats are you looking for on Xuan? Well, of course, you're looking for speed and HP percent. Those are going to be some of your biggest ones. But other than that, as I just mentioned, defense percent is pretty solid as well. I think those are probably some of your top priorities, is looking for something like speed, HP percent, maybe defense percent, and then trying to include crit rate and crit damage where you can is also very good, just because if you're running something like 4-piece Longevous Disciple as well, especially, then that's going to actually allow her to deal some solid damage. But you also want to try and balance having some effect resistance as well. We mentioned before, you know, having her resist effects is very valuable for keeping your team alive. Honestly, speed, HP percent, defense, effect resistance, those are all quite solid. Crit rate and crit damage, also pretty nice if you want her to deal damage. If you don't want her to deal damage, throw those in the gutter. Your next best bet is going to be something like break effect, because the quantum break effect is actually pretty good, especially since her ultimate is an AoE. You're likely going to be breaking a bunch of characters, so break effect isn't too bad either. But speed and HP percent are my top picks for those substats. Now, for those of you curious of what my Xuan's artifacts look like, I'll briefly go over each of them so you just kind of know what I'm working with. So where does my Xuan end up with what I'm working with here? Well, she ends up with 7,300 HP, and this is about where she's going to be. My Lycone isn't maxed all the way quite yet, but this is about where she's going to end up, is probably the mid 7,000s. And then we have 132 speed and 32.6% crit rate and 80% crit damage. This crit rate does get bolstered by not only her own passive of increasing it by 10%, but also the Longevous Disciple increasing it as well. So she actually has a very consistent crit rate there, and then the crit damage is increased by 10% by the Broken Keel, so that's pretty nice as well. So I've actually got a decent crit rate to crit damage ratio going on here. Speed is pretty nice, definitely want to get that up a little bit in my opinion, and then we end up with decent effect resistance of 42.4%, 131 energy regen, and 28.5% break effect. Oh, I forgot to mention in the set section that the healing set isn't too bad on her, because it does increase that outgoing healing by 10%, meaning that when you use her ultimate, she is going to heal extra. So that's pretty nice as well. I forgot to mention that is a pretty solid 2-piece option as well. So she ends up fairly nice here. I think you're really aiming to try and hit about 7,000 on HP for her to be sitting pretty. You could easily hit more if you do more HP percent subsets, and I'll even show you what my stats look like when I move over to something like the Texture of Memories here. And she ends up at 6,300 HP. And this is what I was using for the most part during most of my testing with Xuan before I got her actual Lcone. And this felt very secure as well. Definitely want to bump it up a lot closer to 7,000, but 6,300 was doing just fine for me. All right, so what teams are going to look good for Xuan? Well, most of them are going to look like this. Yeah, basically her and Silverwolf are insane together because, you know, they're both quantum, and Silverwolf applies weakness. They can get that free quantum weakness. These two are crazy, and the vast majority of good Xuan teams are going to look like Silverwolf and Xuan, and then probably like a duo of another pair or something like Brony and Blade are a fantastic combo. You could also do something like Jing Yuan and Ting Yun here. Another duo, you know, duos of other elements along with Silverwolf and Xuan are going to be very good team combos for her, just because Silverwolf is really good and then Xuan can solo sustain. So you can have your DPS and their Harmony character along with them. That is a typical way to do things. You could also do the fabled 4 quantum that is available now because we have the healer links, and you could have like Qingzue here, or Bronya if you have, or not Bronya, Sela if you have here. That'll be your 4 quantum here, and this team can essentially work wherever as long as they don't resist quantum too much. And in a nutshell, that is what a lot of Xuan teams are going to look like. But what other options you got? Well, I'm happy to report that Xuan works very well with the damage over time squad. Sampo, Kafka, Luca, the biggest issue with their teams of wanting to be together to apply as much damage over time as possible is that all 3 of these characters are very fragile, and even if you had a cracked healer like Luo Cha or something, a lot of the problem was that their overall health values are kind of low in general, so if they got one shot, then, you know, Luo Cha can't heal them from that. But Xuan protecting them as much as she does, as well as being able to recover their health, is incredibly helpful. So if you really like the damage over time playstyle, Xuan helps this out a lot by, you know, taking the damage and also being able to heal them a bit. So as much as I've talked about Xuan being able to solo sustain, I did want to mention that when you do pair her with a healer like the brand new Lynx or any of the other healers you might have, your team is basically invincible. So I mean, if you have like a Luo Cha or something and Xuan, I don't think your team can die. I feel like it's going to be very, very difficult. So when you do actually pair with a healer, your team is just very, very strong in the survivability department. So even if you are struggling with her at all and staying alive, pairing another healer or something is just going to make you very, very strong, and you can easily pair her in a bunch of different ways while still having healer. But that's pretty much for some of the tips that I wanted to go over for different team builds, other than the fact that some people might be hesitant to pair her with Blade or something because she's, you know, taking most of the damage, and then Blade doesn't get as much of the buff on his ultimate or something. I'd say just really don't worry about it that much. It ain't that deep, dog. Blade is still going to deal a ridiculous amount of damage whether you're pairing him with Xuan or not, and the fact that she buffs overall max HP means that she's indirectly buffing as much, you know, more damage for him and making him more consistent, and they're still a good pairing together. And if we get more HP scaling characters in the future, then Xuan is going to be a very good pairing for them as well. But hey, that's going to be about it for today's build video. Hopefully it helps you figure out how you want to build your Xuan and gave you the right tips, especially because when I first started using her, I felt her to be a little inconsistent at being capable of solo sustaining, but after figuring it all out, I realized that she is very well capable of doing so, and hopefully this build guide helped you out in the same way. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.